Wow, is it ever beautiful out here in Maybury Park? Just a light snow, a beautiful white dusting on the ground. Feels perfect for Christmas. Thanks so much for joining us for this Christmas weekend service. I'm going to be sharing with you part 2 in our little mini-series on hope. We talked about finding hope on Christmas Eve. Today we're going to be talking about growing and cultivating that hope. I'm excited to be with you. I hope it's warm where you are. It's a little chilly out here. But we're going to warm things up by first singing together a couple of really great Christmas songs. So join us in singing together.
2, 3, 4.
Go and tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. While shepherds kept their watching, or silent flocks by night, behold, throughout the heavens there shone a holy light. Go and tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. The shepherds feared and trembled when low above the earth rang out the angel chorus that hailed our Savior's birth. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. Down in a lonely manger, our humble Christ was born. And God sent us salvation that blessed Christmas morn. Oh, go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. That Jesus Christ is born. Oh,
On Christmas Eve, I talked about finding hope. And I told you the story of a young man by the name of Armand, a 13-year-old boy who was buried in the rubble of an earthquake with 13 other children. And all the other people in town gave up searching for people who were lost in that earthquake, except for one person, and that was Armand's father. Armand's father had made a promise to him that he would always be there for his son. And when Armand was buried under that rubble with 13 other children for 38 long hours, when there was no one else searching and trying to rescue people, Armand said to the other children, "My dad promised me that he would be there for me. And when my dad comes and saves me, you too will be saved." And sure enough, the rock was pulled away and there's Armand. And he said to his dad, "Dad, you said you'd be there for me, and you did it." Amazing story to me, but it points out what I tried to say on Christmas Eve, and that is that hope isn't found in our circumstances. Hope's not found in just, well, good luck, or we just hope for the best, or whatever. Knock on wood. Hope in the Bible is found in a person. And I shared with you that famous Christmas verse from Isaiah the prophet, Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. It was a verse about hope given to Israel in a time when they were incredibly discouraged and threatened by an invasion from an enemy. All hope was pretty much lost when God sent Isaiah the prophet with these famous words. "A child will be born to us, a son will be given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, and Prince of Peace." So we can have hope because of the character of the person that we place our hope in. Just as Israel found hope in this person who would be called Wonderful Counselor. In other words, he'd be able to guide them through life's confusing situations. He'd be a mighty God. He would have the strength to support them when they were weak and tired. He would be an eternal Father. In other words, they would have security and stability in him. He would protect them. And he would be a Prince of Peace, meaning that he had the ability to give them peace when they were anxious or fearful. It's because of the attributes of the person that we have hope. So just as Armand had hope because he knew his father, we have hope when we know the Lord. That's why it says in the book of Psalms so many times things like this. Psalm 130, verse 5, "My soul waits in hope for the Lord." So my hope is not resting in circumstances or knock on wood or fate or, boy, I just hope it gets better next year. Our hope is found in a person, in the person of Christ. And so the question that I want to raise today is, how do we grow hope? How do we cultivate hope? How do we make our hope stronger? There's another verse about hope in the New Testament in the book of Hebrews that says, "This hope we have as an anchor for the soul, a hope both secure and steadfast." So how do we get to the point where our hope is that secure, where it's an anchor for our soul, so that no matter what comes, or what winds or waves come at us in the coming year, that we're rock solid because of our hope? How do we grow our hope until it becomes that strong and that secure? I want to give you 4 ways to grow hope today. And they're really pretty simple. It comes down to this. If hope is found in a person, then it would make sense that the better you know that person and the closer you are to that person, the stronger your hope is going to be. If Armand had just met some stranger and said, "Oh, I'll be there for you," he wouldn't have had that strong a hope when he was under that rubble for 38 hours. But because he had spent 13 years with his father and he knew his father intimately, he knew his father's track record, his hope was strong because his relationship with his father was strong. And so 4 ways to grow hope, and it kind of boils down to that idea of strengthening a relationship. Number 1, this coming year, I want to encourage you, spend more time focusing on the character of God. The character of the Lord. Spend more time focusing on his character. And I'm going to give you a devotional guide that'll help you in the coming year. It'll be found on our website. And this devotional guide is actually broken down into the very 4 attributes that we find in Isaiah 9:6. That he is a wonderful counselor, a mighty God, eternal Father, and Prince of Peace. And I want to encourage you this year as you come into situations where you feel like you need guidance, you feel lost, you feel confused. I want you to go to that devotional guide and study some of those scriptures that talk about God being a wonderful counselor. He's not your average counselor. He's a wonderful counselor. And sometimes we get lost in life. We need guidance. We need counseling. And God knows exactly who we are. He knows us intimately. He knows you intimately. And he knows the way forward for you. And so I want to encourage you when you feel lost, lacking guidance, confused, study some of those scriptures on God being a wonderful counselor. It also says that he's a mighty God. Not just God, but a mighty God. And that is a picture of strength. So this coming year, when you feel like you're weary, when you're tired, when you're weak, when you feel helpless or like giving up, you know what? Over the past 5-6 months, there's been a few times like that for me, where I just felt so out of energy. I encourage you to go to those scriptures that have to do with God being a mighty God. These are scriptures that will encourage you about his strength, his power, his ability to help you and carry you, even when you feel like you can't go on. And then when you come to times where you just feel like the way is uncertain and so insecure and the world is falling apart, there's a devotional guide on God being the eternal Father. I've always puzzled about that phrase, eternal Father, because it's referred to Jesus Christ there, the Son of God. Why is the Son of God called the eternal Father? Because in ancient Israel, that phrase, eternal Father, had the idea of security and stability. That God would be like a father to the nation Israel. He would protect them, provide for them, secure them in turbulent times. And so in the coming year, when you feel things are just out of control and you look at our world and it's like, what's this world coming to? Study some of those scriptures where it says that his attribute is he's like an eternal Father. It'll bring stability and security. And finally, when you feel anxious, worried, fearful, scared, study those scriptures I've given you on him being the Prince of Peace, because he can bring peace where there's anxiety in your heart. I've experienced that so much this year with all the uncertainty with COVID and the church and racial issues and all kinds of things. I've just experienced a kind of peace just because I know who's walking next to me. So that's the first thing I'll say. Just spend more time in the coming year focusing on the character of God. If hope is found in a person, then the closer you are to that person and the better you know that person, the stronger your hope will be. So the second thing we can do to grow our hope, and this might sound a little counterintuitive, but if we're going to spend more time focusing on the character of God, maybe we need to spend a little less time focusing on what I'd call the rubble reports. What do I mean by rubble reports? Well, back to Armand. Imagine if he'd been under that pile of rubble those 38 hours and he had a cell phone and he was checking the news. And he was watching all the reports, the rubble reports, about how disastrous the earthquake was, about how widespread the chaos was, about how people were giving up hope and nobody was being found alive anymore. You can imagine Armand's hope would have turned into despair if he was just focused on all the bad news, the rubble reports. He didn't have a cell phone. He didn't check the news. But you know, I find myself doing that all the time. I just find myself all the time looking at the news and kind of having to dial it back because I actually get consumed with all the rubble reports, all the bad news. Maybe we need to dial that back a bit. My wife and I sort of make it a practice to watch a half-hour news every day, and even that, it's only about 20 minutes after you take into account all the commercials. And we do that to keep up But I find that if I spend too much time focusing on all that bad news, I get discouraged. Just like the prophet Jeremiah in the Old Testament, he wrote a book called Lamentations, which means weeping, because he was weeping and crying over how bad things were in Israel. And when he focused on all the bad news, he really was kind of a mess. Here's what he says in the book of Lamentations, chapter 3. I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the misery. I well remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. You get that? He remembered the affliction. He remembered the misery. He thought about the bitterness and the wandering and the affliction they were in, and his soul was downcast. And that's what can happen when we focus on all the bad news. But then Jeremiah made a choice. He decided he would focus more attention on the character of God and less on all the bad news. And here's how it continues in chapter 3, verse 20. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. Because his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. So you see what's happening there. The minute he turns from remembering all the bad news to remembering the character of God, everything changed for him. He saw the love of God, the compassion of God, the faithfulness of God, and he had hope. So just to summarize those first 2 points, they really come down to focus. If hope is really dependent on a person, not circumstances, then the more time you spend focused on that person, getting close to that person, knowing that person, and the less time you focus on all of the bad news, the stronger your hope will grow. So those 2 things are key. And then 2 other simple suggestions. This third one has to do with prayer. It has to do with just committing every difficult, seemingly hopeless situation to God in prayer. Here's what it says in the book of 1 Peter chapter 5. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. God cares for you. So take it all, and all your anxiety, whatever it is, cast it to him. Talk to God about it. I just find when I commit my fears, my concerns, my problems, my challenges to God, I don't feel like I'm alone anymore. I feel like I've got somebody walking right alongside with me, fighting my battles, calming my heart, just stilling the storm. I read another story about a father-son rescue that kind of illustrates this. This time, it was a young man and his father, a British father and son, who were in the Alps skiing. And they were in some serious ski territory, not just on the bunny hills, but on the real serious outback heavy-duty skiing. And the father and son got separated because the son went down the mountain ahead. And all of a sudden, without warning, the son, and this is all captured on video because the son had a helmet cam on, he came to a crevice, fell in the crevice, and was immediately buried in 6 feet of snow. Completely buried. He couldn't move. He couldn't call out. He couldn't get the attention of his father. And the father skied down the hill and came back up, and he couldn't find his son anywhere. And it was almost a hopeless situation, except for one thing. Because they knew of the danger and the kind of terrain they were in, the son was equipped not only with a helmet cam, but a transceiver, something that sent signals out so that if perchance he got separated from his dad could take the receiving device and find and locate his son. And the father did exactly that. He got out his device and he started following the signals, and he came just to a pile of snow, but there was a signal coming from under that snow, and he took out a shovel and began to dig, and would you not know, 6 feet down, his shovel hit a helmet. And there was his son who'd been buried for 30 minutes, and he was practically frozen. And he just looked up and said, "Thank you, Dad." And this man recovered his son. It's a fascinating story, but the hope here was that the son had that transponder, that device that was sending the signal to the dad so the dad could move in and help. Prayer is just like that. We have that all of the time. We have the opportunity to send signals out to our Heavenly Father and to let Him know where we are and what we're in and what's going on, and to call out for help. That is the privilege of prayer. So it says in Philippians chapter 4, verse 6, don't be anxious about anything. Instead, pray about everything and give thanks. And then the peace of God that transcends all understanding will guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. And I have just found that when I pray about things, the worry subsides and the peace of God rises up inside of me, and my hope grows. So those three simple things, it's all about relationship, really. If hope is found in a person, focus more on the character of that person, focus less on the circumstances of life, and talk to that person. Send those signals. Tell them when you're in need. It doesn't matter if you're buried under an earthquake or a pile of snow. Call out to your Father. Talk to Him in prayer. And then the last thing I will say about hope, and I don't have a particular Bible verse for this, but it's all throughout the Old Testament. Whenever the people of Israel experienced God's faithfulness or power or goodness or protection, they would create something called a hope memorial. They would typically take a pile of stones and pile them up along the way, someplace where they'd won a battle or crossed a river or defeated an enemy. And that monument would stand for ages to come, so that whenever they came back to that monument, they would recall God's faithfulness and they would have hope going forward. Because the principle was that victories in the past create hope for the future. So I would suggest to you that this coming year, whenever you do see God come through or answer a prayer or protect you or calm your fears, whenever you experience Him being a wonderful counselor, a mighty God, an eternal Father, a Prince of Peace, create some kind of memorial. It could be a journal entry. It could be you create a piece of art. It could be a pile of stones. I know one family that experienced God's faithfulness, and in honor of this, they planted a special tree. And so they were reminded always of God's faithfulness during a difficult season. This past year, I think I told you earlier, I had a hard stretch, about 6 months, had to do with things going on in our world, at church, everywhere. And I found myself at times feeling hopeless. Now, I'm not good at writing songs that have lyrics because I'm not a singer. But what I do enjoy is sitting down with my guitar and creating instrumental songs. And for some reason this summer, sitting on my back porch, I found myself just playing this one instrumental song over and over. And it kind of developed into a whole 4 or 5 minute song. And I was looking for a word to describe the feelings I was having in that instrumental song. And the word was hope. I just felt hope. And so I entitled the song Hope. And no, I'm not going to pull out a guitar right now at Maybury Park and play the song for you. I'm sort of one of those closet guitarists that I never actually play publicly, but believe me, I wrote a song. It's a memorial to God because I've felt Him carry me through a particularly difficult situation. So I'd encourage you to create some kind of memorial, whatever it might be. Like I said, a journal entry, a pile of stones, a work of art, something that will give you courage going forward. Because when you experience God's faithfulness in the past, it can give you hope for the future. So those are just 4 simple suggestions for how you can grow and cultivate hope in the coming year. Look, let's face it. If you go back 12 months and see what was in the news on December 24th, 25th of 2019, you know what people were all up about? It was that Boeing had to fire their president because of the crash of two 737 MAX airplanes. And there were reports of measles at 5 airports in America. And you look at that and you just go, wow, that was the big news. Who cares about 5 cases of measles now? We'd all take that as good news, right? We had no idea what was coming in 2020. We don't really have any idea what 2021 could hold. But we do know this: when our hope is in a person, not in our circumstances, we can move forward with confidence. We may not know what the future holds, but we know who holds the future, and our hope is in Him. I want you to hear the story of a woman in our church who had to really cling to God in a difficult season, had to really find her hope in Him. I want you to hear the story of Molly.
The past year and a half has been one of the hardest year and a halves of my life. Right when I graduated from college, I was 4 weeks out of college graduation, I found out I was pregnant. And I knew very shortly thereafter I was going to be a single mom. So it really rocked my world. The things that I wanted to pursue, the things that I was involved in, everything came to a full stop. And I had to really rethink my life and what I was going to do. So because of that pain that had previously happened to me, when I found out March of 2019 that my daughter told me she was pregnant, it was incredibly traumatic. It probably for close to 9 months, I cried every single day. I grappled with how to handle that. It was almost a form of post-traumatic stress disorder. It was reliving something that I never ever wanted one of my children to go through the pain that I had went through. So it's been a long year and a half, and one of the things that when I first found out that Madison was pregnant, it shook everything in me. It shook my faith. I remember within 2 days, we went to the doctor to confirm the pregnancy. And then immediately after that, I never thought I'd go to an abortion clinic, but she was considering abortion. She probably wasn't gonna do it, but I went with her to an abortion clinic. And Maddie very quickly decided and determined, basically walking out of Planned Parenthood, that she said, I can't do this. I have to keep my baby. So I said, okay, we're behind you. We will support you in this. But that process of supporting her through that event and the trauma it brought me, I was in some really dark places for, it's probably until spring of this year. So for a full year, I really, really struggled emotionally. I struggled with depression. I spent months working on regulating my hormones. So that helped, but I also was to the point where I was so low, people could say, God makes all things work together for good. And it just, kind of annoyed me because I was like, thank you, it doesn't feel good right now. So there were some really dark times, and for me, what I would do, many times when I would just lay in my bed and cry, I would just say God's name. I'd just say Jesus, Jesus. And that's all I could do. And I just would pray, and I just would ask Him to be with me because I knew He promised. I knew that He would. And I knew that His arms of love were around me, and if that's all I could say to gather strength in that moment, there's the strength, His name. So, for a year I'm not a type B person, I'm type A, so I get up, get going, push through it, cry. Get up, get going, push through it, cry. And thank God for the love of my husband, who is incredible, my family, my life group, my friends, my mentor, Debbie Pearson, just different people in my life that surrounded me that I could reach out and ask to pray. But in March of this year, I decided to see a therapist, and I thought, why not really dig deep and start looking at how can I make changes in my life? How can I really declare and live out what I believe? So there were some things that were pivotal for me starting to really climb out of the pit. We went on a family vacation this summer. We went to 3 national parks, and I was at Glacier, just looking at the beautiful countryside. and thinking, wow, if God can make Glacier National Park, what can he make in my daughter's life? He can do more, immeasurably more than I can ask or imagine. But part of that is me surrendering, getting rid of worry, anxiety, fear, doubts, and going, no. God says, I know the plans I have for you to prosper you, to give you a hope and future. God says, we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purposes. This past November 23rd, Ella turned 1, and it was a real big time for me to pause and reflect. And it was, I think, the night that we had just a really small little family birthday party celebrating her birthday. And it was probably 11:30 at night, and I got in bed, and this feeling came over me. What if she wasn't here? What if Maddie had chosen to abort her? And I remember my husband saying, honey, if she makes that choice, I think that will haunt you. I think it'll always be with you. And I know it would have been with me. And I'm just really grateful for Maddie's bravery, for Maddie following God's voice. And then I reflected, and I was in bed, and a poem came out of me. And it says, here we are, a year has passed. So much healing has come at last. See, when I heard that you were here, it brought me to my knees in tears. This little seed inside my own, I was so scared of the cold unknown. I had been down this path before. To see my girl here was just too hard. For months the pain tore me apart, but I held on tight and I fought real hard. Month by month revealed more truth, deep lies embedded to be removed, layers peeled back to make some room for freedom, love, and all of you. Forever grateful you are here, a gift to love you, my Ella dear. And I wrote that, and I just cried, and I just thought to myself, I'm so grateful Ella's here. I'm so grateful that God is working it all together for good. I'm so grateful for the love between two families that are co-parenting, that are not together, but we're all focused on God's love, loving God well, and loving Ella and each other well. One of my favorite verses that I cling to is, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. That verse for me is something that I cling to because it brings me hope that he's going to direct my paths, and I can acknowledge him in all my ways, and I can let things go, and I can trust in my Abba Father, that he has a plan, and he has peace and love and joy in that plan, and I can truly rest in him.
Wow, what an incredible and encouraging story of finding and cultivating hope. Thanks so much, Molly and Maddie, for sharing that. As we listened to that story, it occurred to me that for Molly and Maddie, their memorial, it's not a pile of stones, it's not a song, it's actually that little girl, Ella. It's a person. And they will look at that little girl forever and remember, hope is never lost with God. There is no such thing as a hopeless situation when your hope is in God. Back in the Civil War, people were losing hope. It was just a deadly and devastating situation. If you've studied that period of time, the whole country was in a turmoil, hundreds of thousands of lives lost, just the nation being pulled apart. And a man felt like he was losing hope, and so he wrote a song. The poem, actually, that the song is based on is called I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. And in that song, he gave voice to the idea that with God, no matter what's going on in our world, what the circumstances look like, with God, there's always hope. Let's listen to that song.
I heard the bells on Christmas Day. The world familiar carols play, and wild and sweet the words repeat of
want to encourage you, go on the journey with us at Oak Pointe Church and cultivate your relationship with God, because hope will grow as you get to know Him. Again, you can go to our website and download that ebook. It's a devotional. It's called Finding Hope. Go to oakpointe.org/Christmas and you can get that. I really encourage you, strengthen your heart by spending time focusing on the character of God. Thank you so much for being with us, and God bless you.
How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross is broken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. That night so silent, the hope of heaven, a baby born to set us free. The gift is given to pay my ransom, destined to die on Calvary. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your very body began to ring. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me.
and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness and wonders of his love and wonders of his love and wonders of his love, the wonders of his love. Let every heart prepare him room. Let every voice say praise to you. Let every heart prepare him room. Let every voice say praise to you. Let every heart prepare him room. Let every voice say praise to you. Let every heart prepare him room. And heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing.